Thank you, dear colleagues, dear organizers. Thank you for having me, and thank you also for inviting me to this distinguished group and including me in this. I'm new in this network. So today I will be talking about issue of my title of my presentation is When Stagnation Becomes Norm. Bosnia and Herzegovina's path to the European Union. Bosnia and Herzegovina is always an actual issue. So, when we talk about the accession process of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we should say that Bosnia and Herzegovina is currently one of 5 Western Balkan countries with EU candidate status. The other ones are Serbia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Albania. So regarding this accession progress, Bosnia and Herzegovina completed SAA in 2015 and then applied for EU membership 1 year later in 2016. Bosnia and Herzegovina obtained EU candidate status in December 2022 and received conditional approval for the accession negotiations in March 2024. But it had very little with efforts of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was a result of changed geopolitical situation and completely different geopolitical and security consideration of European Union. So European Union changed its stance towards Western Balkans. As of March 2025, Bosnia and Herzegovina has not yet met all conditions to open accession negotiations. Bosnia and Herzegovina has not yet adopted and submit its reform agenda. That is a prerequisite to receive EU funds from a reform and growth facility. So, Bosnia and Herzegovina was the last of Western Balkan candidate countries to complete SCAA, last to submit EU membership application, and last to receive EU candidate status. So Bosnia and Herzegovina is the only Western Balkan country without an adopted negotiating framework. Also, Bosnia and Herzegovina is the only Western Balkan country without approved reform agenda. Kosovo has approved agenda, although they are not officially candidate status candidate. They are officially partner. That was their name. Also, along with Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina has not fully implemented EU restrictive measures against Russia and Belarus. It is very fiercely opposed by the political leaders of Serb constitutive people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we can say that EU accession progress of Western Balkan candidate country is generally stalled. It generally lacks substantial progress in fulfilling fundamental political and economic criteria, with Bosnia and Herzegovina as the, let's say, champion of stagnation and stalemate on the path to the European Union. So, regarding the decisions of EU institutions, in December 2024, Council concluded that the integration dynamics of Bosnia and Herzegovina have been stalled. So it's understandable, and urged all domestic political actors to implement the necessary reforms, of course. Then appoint a chief negotiator and a national IPA coordinator under the instrument for pre-accession 3. So Bosnia and Herzegovina still doesn't have a chief negotiator, and it's very delicate position in Bosnia and Herzegovina even to appoint a chief negotiator. Then they also asked them to develop a national program for the adoption of the EU acquis, adopt and submit its reform agenda, and fully implement EU restrictive measures against Russia and Belarus, among the all others demands from the European Union. It was just, let's say, 3-4 months ago. So, where are the problems regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina? So, almost 30 years after concluding Dayton Peace Agreement that was concluded in September-December of 1995, so Bosnia and Herzegovina is still under the protectorate of international community. So there is the institution, Office of High Representative of International Community in Sarajevo, and it is the center of executive and legislative power in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it is above all elected institutions in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It has authorities to make laws, amend laws. It can even amend constitutions of two entities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska. The former high representatives, they even dismissed elected politicians. So they have, let's say, supra-executive and supra-legislative authorities and no democratic legitimacy. So also, domestic political institutions and political actors are completely dependent on international actors, with the US diplomacy as the most influential external actor in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There was a situation, I think 3 or 4 months ago, in the Parliament of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is one of these federal units of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they were about to vote about a certain law regarding gas interconnectivity. So there were some major disputes between Croat and Bosniak political representatives, but they were very close to make, let's say, a compromise between, but US diplomacy wasn't so interested for this compromise, and in one moment, during the parliament session, the screen was turned on, and the US ambassador addressed the MPs in the parliament and told them, you have to vote like this. So just imagine, in one sovereign country, the US ambassador, during the session of the parliament, he shows up on the screen like this, and he's telling the MPs how to vote and what to do. So regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosnia and Herzegovina is deeply divided, plural society, with Bosniaks, Croats and Serb as the three societal segments, or the three pillars of society, and they are also, according to the constitution, they are three constitutive peoples in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there isn't one politically sovereign people, there are three politically sovereign peoples. And the problem is, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that there is no consensus on the political system and state community. There is no basic consensus on political system and state community among the three constituted peoples and their political representatives. And if you look at these three constituted peoples, let's say Croats and Serbs, they accept Bosnia and Herzegovina only with power-sharing mechanisms and federalist principles. And on the other side, Bosniak political leaders, they see this power sharing and federation as a threat to the survival of the state. So this is how these divisions work in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Completely lack of consensus on these basic political issues. And if we look to the European Union, so according to the poll from June 2024, there is an overall support of accession to the EU of 71.2%. So there is overall support, and you should look at in these two entities, Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska. So 83.8% of support in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that is mostly consisted of Bosniaks and Croats, and Republika Srpska, where there is about 90% of Serbs, there is little less than 50%, so 48.3% of support for EU accession in this entity of Republika of Srpska. So also it's important to note that Bosnia and Herzegovina is very closely economically integrated in the European Union. If you look at their trade, their exports, imports, they are pretty economically integrated into the European Union. So the Dayton Constitution, so their constitution is part of Dayton Peace Agreement. It established these power-sharing mechanisms to regulate relations between these three constitutive peoples. But the EU, in their reports, they call for constitutional and electoral reforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina, quote, in line with European standards, to eliminate all forms of inequality and discrimination in the electoral process. So there are some important issues regarding verdicts of European Court of Human Rights. There are few cases regarding that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, political system violates the Convention of Human Rights, because there is, let's say in Bosnia and Herzegovina, if you don't belong to these three constitutive people, you cannot be a member of the upper chamber of their state parliament. Also, let's say in Federation of Bosnia, their presidency as a state executive body, it's consisted of Croat, Serb and Bosniak. So people in Federation, in Federation Bosnia and Herzegovina, only Serbs and Bosniaks can run for this presidency, and in Republika Srpska, only Serb can run. So there are elements of ethnic discrimination in the political system of Bosnia and Herzegovina regarding some institutions. State presidency and state upper chamber, and all the other institutions. Everyone has active and passive right. Everyone can stand for elections. Everyone can be elected, no regarding their ethnic identity. So, so this European Court of Human Rights, for the first time in their history, they said in these few cases that entire political system is practically discriminatory, and it should be changed. So it was some kind of, let's say, liberal interventionism in the political system, and all these reforms are practically directed towards liberalization and abolishment of power-sharing mechanisms. And this is only welcome and supported by Bosnian political actors who advocate majoritarian institutions, because they are majority in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Also, there is problem with these power-sharing mechanisms that were said that are discriminatory in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Same principles exist in Belgium and South Tyrol, but they don't consider this to be discriminatory by the European Court of Human Rights. And problem with this constitutional and electoral reforms is that they affect very delicate balance of power among three constitutive peoples. So it is interesting that EU does not call for abolishment of office of High Representative with its unlimited powers and no democratic control. So now, in this moment, you have a really large crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because among all the other authorities that this high representative has, he made a law amendments, and so he decided that criminal act is if you don't implement the rules of High Representative. And now the president of entity of Republika Srpska was sentenced for a 1-year prison and 6 years ban to hold a political position because he did not implement rules of High Representative. And so now you have a really major crisis, but one of the major, always there is some kind of crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but this one is really large, because now the institutions from Republika Srpska, they completely oppose to all state institutions from the state level. And what is this, let's say, issue? So if we look, there are many factors in Bosnia. There are many stakeholders in Bosnia and Herzegovina, even in European Union. They say that the major obstacle for the EU accession of Bosnia and Herzegovina is their power-sharing arrangements. So this constitutional order, this Dayton constitutional order, that has these power-sharing arrangements that shares power between three constituted people, that has some elements of ethnic discrimination, but similar power-sharing arrangements exist in Belgium and South Tyrol. Let's say in Belgium, if you belong to French-speaking community, you cannot run for Flemish regional parliament. And according to the rules of European Court of Human Rights, it is not discriminatory. So they said that's not discriminatory. In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, they said that is discriminatory. Also, in South Tyrol, there are some positions in regional government and regional parliament that are reserved only for members of German and Italian community. No one else can hold these positions. So there are political systems in Europe with this kind of, let's say, ethnic privileges, ethnic quotas in certain, let's say, parts of Europe. So I think my opinion is that the main causes of ongoing stagnation, so this is really ongoing stagnation in the EU pet of Bosnia and Herzegovina, is first, there are deep domestic divisions, definitely deep domestic divisions on basic political issues. But I think that societies and states can exist with this kind of divisions, but they need to be managed somehow. But there are plural societies, and this is something that exists. It should be really accepted as a fact. And two, you have external interventionism that hinder compromises of domestic political actors. Very often, when they will be very close to, let's say, to reaching some kind of consensus, to make agreement, then you have intervention of external actors, who very often are not interested for these compromises of domestic political actors. And what is to be done? So, after almost 30 years of extensive external regulation of Bosnia and Herzegovina state and society. Let's say you have this issue in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we spoke about Constitutional Court. In the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina, you have 3 foreign justices. So 6 justices from Bosnia and Herzegovina and 3 foreign justices that are named by the President of European Court of Human Rights. So there is this really extensive external regulation of Bosnia and Herzegovina state and society, but responsibility for the state and society should be handed to the domestic political representatives, people who are democratically elected, that have legitimacy to make decisions, to make compromises, to decide. I think that, and I don't know how it would be that let's say, country that is under international protectorate, how can they become a full EU member? Really, I cannot imagine something like that. Thank you for your interest.